I'm taking over this old man's house. Get out, said my husband, arrogantly claiming my family home for himself and his parents after my father, who we lived with, passed away. Don't you guys get it? Hearing my shallow husband's words, I couldn't help but laugh in disbelief. My counterattack against my belittling husband brought his family to their knees. I am Allie. My husband Felix and I were living with my father. My mom passed away when I was in high school, and since then, my dad has raised me with so much love. I adore my dad. When he turned 70 and got older, I got worried and asked Felix if we could live with him. Felix agreed, and we started living at my family home. Are you really sure about this? I can manage on my own, my dad said to me, concerned. This was about Felix and I moving in with him. When I first brought up the idea to my dad, he seemed happy for a moment but quickly became worried. I appreciate it, but am I going to be in the way of your and Felix's life? Dad always puts me first. But when I told him how much I wanted to be with him and that Felix agreed, he smiled and gave us his blessing. Today is the moving day for Felix and me. We're unpacking the stuff that the movers brought in. Not this again. I've already told you I wanted to do this. That's right, Dad. Plus, it's closer to work for me, and it's a big help, Felix added. Hearing us, my dad smiled a little and agreed. After we had unpacked a bit, we went to the living room, where Dad had made us some warm coffee. I was just about to have some coffee when I heard you guys coming down the stairs. Thought you might need a break, so I prepared some for you and Felix too. Felix and I, tired from the move, gratefully accepted and rested a bit, chatting with Dad. Watching them, I felt like our life here would be more fun than before, and I was happy. After the break, Felix and I went back to finish unpacking. Rolling up my sleeves, I geared up for the final push. Hey, you could quit your job. Stay by Dad's side, Felix suddenly suggested. I was stunned. What do you mean? Well, now that we're living here, we're saving on rent, right? So, you quitting your job to take care of Dad and keep him company might give you some peace of mind, right? Felix and I both worked, and I did most of the housework. Felix helped sometimes, but it was still pretty hectic. I was a bit torn about Felix's suggestion, but told him I'd think about it. Sure, spending more time with Dad would be great. And focusing on housework might lessen my load. Felix's proposal was tempting, but it would mean relying on him for income. I worried that it might become a burden for him. Felix had agreed to moving in, and I wondered if it was okay to depend on him even more. With our living situation changing from today, I decided to keep living as we had been until now. Felix told me not to push myself, but it was my idea to bring up the topic of living together. I thought I couldn't keep relying on Felix. A month has passed since then. Why don't you quit your job for Dad's sake? Felix suggested again. By that time, I was also thinking it might be a good idea. Living together actually reduced my burden, not increased it. The reason was that Dad was doing the housework. When I came home thinking about preparing dinner, Dad had already made it, or he had cleaned up. It seemed like I was increasing Dad's burden instead. Feeling guilty about this, I was considering quitting my job. Yeah, maybe I should. I'm sorry to put the financial burden on you, Felix. What are you talking about? Don't worry about that. So, I decided to quit my job. When I told Dad, he said to keep working since he would do the housework, but when I insisted on wanting to do the housework, he thought about it and agreed. Since then, I've been able to focus on housework, spending more time with Dad, and enjoying fulfilling days. However, things gradually started to change. Welcome home. You must be tired today. Yeah, is dinner ready? Felix started coming home later, and by the time he arrived, Dad was already in bed, so the three of us eating together became less frequent. Today, while watching TV with Dad. Hey, can you be quiet while I'm eating? Oh, sorry. Felix was still the kind Felix when Dad was around, But recently, he's become very cold when it's just the two of us. I thought maybe I was burdening him since I quit my job, so all I could do was apologize. When Felix finished eating and I was about to prepare his usual after-dinner drink, he got up and started to leave the dining room. "Where are you going? Aren't you having your drink?" "Bath," he said curtly and left the room, slamming the door. I sighed, wondering if he was in a bad mood or just tired, as these kinds of days continued. The next day, as usual, I waited for Felix to come home after Dad went to bed, but he didn't return even after midnight. Worried, I called Felix, but he didn't answer. Feeling anxious, I received a text from him. "What?" The coldness was evident even in a text message. I sighed again, relieved that he seemed okay. "Still at work?" "I was worried since you're late." His reply came quickly when I sent that message. "On a business trip." Just 3 words. But it was enough for me to understand he wouldn't be coming home today. I hadn't heard anything about a business trip and wanted to ask him why he didn't tell me beforehand, but I thought bringing it up might just make Felix more upset. "You're on a business trip?" "Got it. When will you be back?" I texted but got no reply. After that, Felix's business trips seemed to increase. And he didn't even tell me when he'd be away or when he'd be back. Dad was worried too, and when he asked Felix if everything was okay, Felix would respond with a bright smile he no longer showed me, saying, "I'm totally fine. Working hard for the family." Seeing this, I thought maybe he was upset with me. I tried to have a talk, but he'd brush it off with, "I'm just busy or too tired, let's talk some other time," and we never really had a proper conversation. Eventually, Felix hardly came home at all. That made me suspicious. Could he be cheating? Then, out of the blue, I got a message from my mother-in-law. "Give me Felix's company address." Just 1 sentence, no greeting. My in-laws hadn't liked me since the beginning of our marriage, often making snide remarks or harassing me, so I gradually distanced myself from them. Felix understood this, so it never affected our relationship, but it also meant we never mended ties with his parents. We remain in a distant relationship. When I got this sudden email from my mother-in-law, I wondered what it meant and replied, "Hello, it's been a while. Why do you need Felix's company address?" She must have been displeased with my response because she called me, clearly angry. "Hello, long time no see." "It's not a long time no see. You're making Felix take care of your father, you've quit your job and aren't doing any housework. How dare you? Because of you, he's staying with us now. He forgot his lunch today, so I was going to take it to his office. And you have the nerve to act like this. I can't believe it. Give me the address right now. And just so you know, Felix will be living with us from now on." I was stunned by her tirade. I found out that the days Felix said he was on a business trip, he was actually going back to his parents' house. I was shocked to hear they had such a story about me. Felix had told me it was okay to quit my job, to stay with Dad, but his true feelings seemed different, and I felt so sad I almost cried. I couldn't say anything back, just gave her Felix's office address and hung up. Trying to calm down, I made some coffee in the living room when Dad came in. I smiled as usual and asked him, "Want some coffee?" He looked at me, smiled, and said, "Sure, I'd like some." As we drank our coffee together, Dad started talking. "Your mom and I used to argue a lot when we were young. Misunderstandings, miscommunications, but we always resolved them by talking and being honest. Maybe couples who can fight and fix their relationship understand each other better and get along more deeply than those who can't." Dad's kind words. I felt like he saw right through me. His words resonated with me, and I decided to have a serious talk with Felix. "You're right, Dad. Thanks." I smiled and Dad smiled back. Later, I sent Felix an email about the call from his mother and that I wanted to talk. But he replied saying it was too much trouble, and I sighed. Who's really making things difficult? Anger towards Felix started to rise in me. I wanted to reply impulsively, but I knew I had to stay calm, so I took a deep breath. Perhaps that was the trigger, but Felix stopped contributing to our living expenses. He wouldn't answer my calls, and my emails about the finances were ignored. I started feeling my love for Felix fade. Was there any point in staying married? The word divorce began to cross my mind. I couldn't believe how irresponsible and selfish he was. However, not wanting to worry Dad any further, I put thoughts of divorce on hold and started using my savings from before I was married to cover our expenses. I had gotten used to life without Felix, enjoying my days with Dad. But then one day, Dad collapsed. He was rushed to the hospital, and I was told he didn't have long left. I broke down crying, unable to hear what the doctors and nurses were saying. When I went to Dad's room, he was conscious and forced a smile, saying, "Sorry to worry you." I took his hand and said, "You'll be fine. You'll get better," trying to smile, but my eyes were swollen from crying. "What a face you're making," he said, smiling sadly. Seeing him like that almost made me cry again. Knowing that he would need to stay in the hospital, I went home to get some clothes and other things. Alone in the house, I started crying again. It was the home I'd grown up in, filled with too many memories. The thought of being there alone was unbearable. As I cried, my phone rang. Thinking it was the hospital, I checked and saw an email from Felix. "We're living separately now, so handle your own expenses. Why don't you use your dad's pension?" Seeing that, I impulsively threw my phone. That was the moment any feelings for Felix completely vanished. I was shaking with anger and sadness. But then thought it was a waste to even be angry at him. I wondered what Dad would think if he saw me like this. And somehow found the strength to calm down. I washed my face. I finished preparing for the hospital and was about to leave when the mail arrived. Among it was something that seemed like good news to me. I set the document aside and headed back to the hospital. Dad's condition only worsened, and I knew our time together was running short. I spent my time at the hospital laughing and talking with Dad, then crying when I returned home. Eventually, Dad passed away peacefully. I was prepared, but the loss hit me hard. Nevertheless, Dad left me with so much, and his presence in my heart was immense. With support from relatives, we managed to get through the funeral smoothly, but Felix and his parents never showed up. I hadn't specifically informed them of Dad's passing, so I didn't expect them to come. But they must have found out from someone else, because a few days after I'd finished sorting Dad's belongings and paperwork, Felix showed up nonchalantly with a bunch of his stuff. "Long time no see. Dad passed away, huh?" The moment I saw Felix's face, I felt a rush of blood to my head. Suppressing the urge to hit him, I took a deep breath and responded calmly. "What do you want? And what's with all this stuff?" "What do you mean what for? I'm your husband, aren't I? And this stuff belongs to my parents." "What?" I felt extremely uncomfortable when Felix used the word husband. I couldn't comprehend what he was saying. How could someone who left home on his own, stopped contributing to the expenses, and lived carefreely claim such a thing? I was so appalled I couldn't find the words to respond. "Weren't you waiting for me? No job, struggling with living expenses, and having to take care of my father all alone. You're speechless with joy? More like you fell for my plan." I asked him what he meant by plan. And his reply was unbelievable. "I never wanted to live with that old man. Living with him was a joke. But I thought if I said that, you'd consider divorce, and then I wouldn't get the house. So I pretended to be a good husband and got you unemployed, making you and the old man dependent on me. That way, the house would become mine." Hearing this, I unconsciously glared at Felix. It was inconceivable. I felt pathetic for having married such a person, and overflowed with remorse for my father. I tried to control my trembling body, full of anger. "But you left and stopped contributing financially. What you're saying is contradictory." Felix scratched his head, looking annoyed. Yeah, I reached my limit. I never thought I was such a short-tempered guy. But I thought you didn't have the courage to divorce me, so even if I wasn't there, my plan would still succeed. Looking at his sickeningly smiling face, I couldn't even remember why I ever liked him. I didn't want to see his face or hear his voice anymore. In my eyes, Felix had become utterly repulsive. And so, as planned, I succeeded. This house may be old, but it's spacious and in a good location. It will be valuable if sold. From today, I'm going to live here with my parents. Could there be anyone else so selfishly motivated? He must not have learned any morals. Well, considering his parents, it's not surprising. As I stood silently, appalled, Felix, thinking he had shocked me, delivered another blow. I'm taking over this old man's house. Get out. Watching Felix's parents' belongings being brought in, I realized he didn't understand his position at all. He looked down on me with a smug face, calling my father an old man. There was no way I could let this go. I couldn't hold back my laughter anymore at Felix's words and burst out laughing. Surprised by my sudden laughter, Felix looked puzzled. Have you lost your mind? That's my line. The thought of revealing the truth to him made me laugh uncontrollably. Angered by my reaction, Felix started to fume. But I ignored him and told him the reality. Don't you know? This is my house. There's no way it could ever be yours. As Felix stood frozen from my words, I added more. Plus, you and I are strangers now, didn't your mom tell you? I said with a laugh. Felix was dumbfounded. And quickly made a phone call. Apparently to his mother. Hey, Mom? Allie's saying something weird. We haven't divorced, right? She's saying you know something about it. What does that mean? What? You sent it? What have you done? Listening to Felix, it seemed like he was finally understanding the situation. He ended the call with a twisted face. You filed the divorce papers? Yes. Right. The day Dad was hospitalized, I received a filled-out divorce form from your mother by mail. I was so happy I sent it in the next day. Your mom has her moments, huh? Even if it arrived, you weren't supposed to send it. That was just in case. Mom told me to fill it out. I didn't mean to divorce. Well, you filled it out, didn't you? I didn't know you didn't mean it. You got your wish for a divorce, you should be thanking me. Watching Felix's frustration was strangely satisfying. His mother probably sent it to harass me, but at that time, I was contemplating divorce, so it was indeed good news for me. Then Felix started panicking about property division and claiming he was entitled to half of the house for living with my father, but I rebuffed all his claims. I knew we didn't have enough assets for division, explained that property division wasn't necessary, and since the house was in my father's name at the time of our divorce, it didn't count. He even absurdly claimed my savings from before we married should be part of the division, but I clarified that too was not the case. Felix turned pale, unable to reply, just opening and closing his mouth like a fish. I wanted to tease him, but I composed myself and said, Are we done here? It's troublesome to have so much luggage from a stranger in the house. It's basically trespassing, so if you continue to stay, I'll have to call the police. With that, Felix hurriedly moved his stuff out and left. I sprinkled salt at the entrance and prayed at my parents' altar. This is right, isn't it? I'll become stronger, so watch over me. I wondered if my parents had reunited in heaven, and that thought softened my sadness, making the loneliness fade away. I gathered myself and started job hunting. Just then, a friend contacted me. I heard that you contacted me after learning that I was looking for a job. Hearing I was looking for work, they wanted to refer me to a job in my field. I immediately took up the offer, went for an interview, and got hired on the spot. A few days later, Felix sent me an email. I was just being stubborn that day. I actually wanted to get back together with you, that's why I came over. I knew it was all lies, and while I pondered what to respond, I eventually decided to ignore it. Despite my silence, he kept sending poetic emails like, "We were like the sun and moon back then. I reached for you but couldn't touch you, now those troubled days are just memories. We can be in each other's reach now. I can't live without your love. Give me that radiant, fulfilling love once more. My life is yours. You're the most important thing to me. Our love is eternal. No matter where you are, my heart is your home." I showed these poetic messages to my colleagues, joking if we could use them for work. I'm an illustrator and now working as a manga editor, so such phrases can sometimes be useful. "Ah, there's Mr. Stalker. Handy when we need material." Now, Felix has unwittingly become a provider of jokes for me. I feel nothing but disgust, so I don't reply to his messages. As time goes on, one day my doorbell rings. Looking through the peephole, I see Felix standing there. Thinking he has finally shown up, I immediately call the police. "Hey! I know you're in there. I can see your car. Please, just listen to me. I'm in big trouble. We were supposed to move into this house, so my parents put our family home up for sale. Now I have to leave. Please, help me out." Despite hearing his pleas, it's none of my concern. I think, didn't he realize he couldn't take my house when he decided not to retract his claim? It's apparent from the emails he sent that he hasn't given up, but I'm just astounded by his family's naive thinking. Soon, the police arrive and try to persuade Felix, but he resists vehemently and is eventually taken away. Then the onslaught of Romeo emails resumes, and when I continue to ignore them, Felix's parents start contacting me. At first, they call, but when I ignore those two, they resort to emails. "How can you know we are in trouble and not help? What kind of person are you? Contact us immediately. Why don't we have a proper talk? We were once family. Isn't this a bit cold? We sold our house because of you and now we're living in an old apartment. Why won't you vacate the house? You must have received inheritance from your father, right? That's why you aren't struggling. We quit our jobs. You need to take responsibility." This is what they mean by blood cannot be denied. Do they think whatever they decide will just happen? I'm filled with anger at these extremely unpleasant emails. How much more can they look down on people? I thought about leaving it be but decided to block Felix and his parents' contacts. I considered changing my contact details, but I didn't feel like spending money because of these people. I was determined to ignore them, but I reached my limit. I thought blocking them would bring back my peaceful life, but I was naive to think so. Later, Felix's family showed up at my house again. Knowing they know where I live, I expected such incidents. However, I cannot bear the thought of leaving this house filled with memories. "Come out now. You know we're in trouble. Fix your mood now. I'm saying I'll get back together with you. Ignoring people in trouble is inhumane." The doorbell kept ringing. The front door was continuously knocked. I mercilessly called the police, but then the noise suddenly stopped. Curious, I looked through the peephole and saw a familiar-looking man arguing with Felix's family. "You're being a nuisance. Go home." The ex-family, taken aback, responded. What? Who are you? Could you be the person she's having an affair with?" The man, faced with such retorts from Felix's ex-family, looked at them with disdain. "That kind of thinking is why no one takes you seriously. Do you even see what's around you? This is a residential area. Look, you're causing such a disturbance that people are gathering. Seriously, you're too loud." From my peephole, I could indeed see neighbors starting to gather. I sighed, embarrassed by the spectacle. The ex-family, realizing the situation, began to panic and fumble. Soon, the police arrived. Some of them had been here before, saying to Felix, "You again?" Hearing this, his ex-family's faces turned beet red. "How much trouble are you going to cause?" "Shame on you," the man said before leaving. I silently thanked him in my heart and breathed a sigh of relief. Afterward, as the onlookers watched, the ex-family was taken away by the police and the crowd dispersed. A few hours later, my doorbell rang again. Peeking through, I saw the same man who had argued with Felix's ex-family. I hesitated but eventually opened the door cautiously, and the man smiled at me. "Long time no see. You should have told me you were back." I recognized him but couldn't recall who he was until he helped me out. "You don't remember? It's been over 10 years. It's me, Taylor." Hearing his name, I finally remembered. He was my childhood friend, Taylor. "Oh my goodness, Taylor. Now that you mention it, you do look familiar." Taylor used to live next door but moved to a school specializing in sports when we were in elementary school, and we hadn't seen each other since. "Remembered, huh? I've moved back home too. So we're neighbors again. That's amazing. Just like old time. And thanks for earlier. You really helped me out." I thanked him again, and Taylor laughed it off. "Don't mention it," he said, and I couldn't help but laugh too. We caught up, and I ended up telling him about the recent events. Taylor offered his support, saying he'd always be there to help. I felt reassured to have such a strong ally. Taylor even visited my late father at his funeral, remembering him from our childhood. I was touched to have someone who shared even a bit of my memories. Later, I received a letter from a lawyer in my mailbox. Confused, I opened it to find a proof of content. It claimed I had committed adultery during my marriage and demanded compensation. "What's this?" I wondered, then noticed an email on my phone. The email, from an unknown address with the subject regarding proof of content, read like a threat. "Felix has filed a lawsuit against you for infidelity during your marriage. If you admit and comply, we won't make it a bigger issue. This will also be notified to your workplace. Considering your future, it's better to pay immediately." I knew no lawyer would send such a thing. It was clearly the work of Felix's ex-family. The proof of content itself looked dubious, so I decided to take it to a lawyer's office for consultation. When I had a real lawyer examine the documents, they turned out to be complete forgeries. Even the lawyer's name listed wasn't registered anywhere, it was fake. I figured as much and considered ignoring the proof of content, but I decided to play along a bit in an email. "I have reviewed the proof of content, but I can't think of anything relevant. If you're accusing me of infidelity, please present some evidence. There's no physical evidence since you seem to have erased it all. However, the emotional damage Felix has suffered is significant, and that's what the compensation is for." A lawyer would never proceed without evidence. Their shallow approach was evident. There's no fact of infidelity, so obviously there's no evidence. Are you really acting as a lawyer on such baseless claims? Felix's determination swayed me. I wanted to help. Show some sincerity, and we won't make a big deal out of it. Quite an emotional lawyer, aren't you? Just so you know, impersonating a lawyer is illegal and can lead to imprisonment or fines. You are a real lawyer, right? After this exchange, their responses stopped. Curious about their next move, another email arrived. "Of course, I'm real, but I've been moved by your sincerity. I'm considering dropping the lawsuit." No need to drop it. I'm not passionate but rather completely indifferent. Since you've fabricated infidelity, I'm thinking of hiring a lawyer and fully contesting this. I'm looking forward to meeting this passionate lawyer in court. After that, there was no further contact. However, Felix's ex-family then came charging at my door in the middle of the night, shouting, "We were wrong. Please don't sue us." I woke up furious and looked at the clock. It was past 1 a.m. I reached the limit of my anger, partly due to the irritation caused by sleepiness. "Be quiet. Enough. Don't ever bother me again," I yelled as I opened the door. Shocking Felix's ex-family who had never seen this side of me. Toxic family. "If you try to bother me again, I won't let it go," I said, holding my father's wooden sword. Seeing it, Felix's ex-family turned pale, with Felix's mother starting to cry and Felix muttering an apology. "Instead of apologizing, just disappear. Never show your face again," I yelled even more furiously, causing my mother-in-law's eyes to turn red as if she was about to cry. Then I saw a police car approaching, likely called by neighbors due to the late-night disturbance. The ex-family was quickly taken away by the police. "That person tried to hit us with a wooden sword," Felix's mother accused as she was led away. I explained to the police I thought they were intruders, banging on the door at this hour. I kept the wooden sword for self-defense. They seemed convinced. Unbeknownst to me, Taylor had been nearby, witnessing their frequent assaults and testified on my behalf. The police, deeming their behavior malicious, took them away without question. Finally, peace was restored. The next day, at Taylor's suggestion, I filed a victim report. Given the repeated police incidents, it was smoothly processed. Taylor said he had heard my shouting and was about to come over the previous night, joking that I sounded really scary. Later, Felix's ex-family was issued a restraining order and stopped bothering me. Additionally, someone had filmed the commotion and posted it online, leading to whispers in the neighborhood. Unable to move due to lack of funds, they were stuck in an awkward situation, probably living off the ex-parents' pensions. As for me, Taylor and I grew closer, and a few months after reuniting, he confessed, and we started dating. Being with him, who always makes me laugh and is so kind, makes me incredibly happy. I feel grateful every day, thinking this must be a connection my father gave me.